Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
Thank you so much for taking a few minutes of your day to join me, Randall, on this edition of Around with Randall. I had the opportunity to do some reading and a little bit of watching of one of my favorite, what I'll think of as political thinkers, outsider, who got into the conversation about the power of institutions and how important it is to keep your perspective as an institutionalist without being afraid of change. Where does all of this come from and how does it connect with philanthropy? As we evolve into 2025, I'm finding myself more and more often with boards, with offices, advancement, foundation, development, however you want to call them, fundraising offices, to some degree with donors, but not as much, talking about how we have seen over the last 10 years or so, and some might argue 20, a revolutionary change to philanthropy. And over the next 30 seconds, not going to be surprised what I tell you, but we have fewer number of people making donations. And the people that are, and the stat on that is about 2/3 of the households in 2002 made gifts or a gift to a nonprofit. Today we're below probably 47%. And that the 80-20 model that I kind of started my career with, 80% of our dollars come from 20% of our donors, is probably morphing closer to 97-3 or 95-5, that 3 or 5% of our donors make up 95 to 97% of our dollars. That the larger donors are making a bigger difference. We're seeing a decaying of our annual giving platforms. Events aren't driving dollars the way that people need or want. All this is to say that there is this change occurring in philanthropy, and that I see a lot of challenging the wanting or willing to change. So today I want to talk about this idea of institutions and institutionalists versus change. No matter what nonprofit area or sector you're in, no matter how big of an office, no matter how big of an organization, if you're not evolving, and evolution is about change or morphing to the current status or situation. If we take it into its primary thought process of evolution of Darwin, Charles Darwin, theory of evolution, that animals that didn't adjust as the world changed became extinct. Certainly humans had an input on that in many regards. But those that have evolved are the ones that elevate, that stay, that survival of the fittest. And I think there's some truth in this in the nonprofit world. The challenge becomes we have institutions that we don't want to see change. And here's the great mystery of today. How do we change our organizations without changing the institutions? What do I mean by that? Well, to do that, let me go back in history. Let me tell you about a couple of amazing institutionalists. They believed in the institution, but they changed it to make it better. One, Martin Luther King, believed in the institution of equality, believed that the way in which we look at people needs to change and how, most importantly, we treat people. What he did was he kept the institution, but changed the process. Nonviolence. And what came out of it was a complete augmentation of the perspective of America as to how we look at race. It's a journey, not a destination. We're not there yet, but there was huge steps. The institution remained, but the process changed. Another one is Abraham Lincoln, probably one of the most famous institutionalists, because he believed in the Union. But we have to change the process, change this internal view of slavery. If you've watched Daniel Day-Lewis and the movie Lincoln, which I recommend to anyone, That's what this is about. The change of the 13th Amendment in the Congress in that early part of 1865 and trying to figure out how do we move this forward. Fascinating. Institutionalist, but with change. Another one is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Believed in capitalism. As the Depression is setting in the Hoover administration, is what he's watching this from a distance in New York, getting ready to run for president. He changes doesn't change the institution, he changes the process. He adds things like the SEC and the Federal Reserve System, things that we hold on to dearly today. He evolves his idea of capitalism. It doesn't change the institution. My all-time favorite and under-discussed, my opinion, American leader is George C. Marshall. George C. Marshall, many of you probably saying, who the heck is this guy, was the Secretary of War. And some of you are like, what is that? Well, that's the predecessor for being Secretary of Defense. Going into World War II, we had the War Department, and then there was the Department of the Navy, Department of the Army. We didn't have an Air Force. Marines kind of were under the Navy. We had very confined military. George C. Marshall was tasked by the president to reinvent the military to go into World War II after December 7th, 1941. He believed in the institution, all the things that made it great, but he changed the process. But the key to George Marshall is then he did it again. Because you may have heard of the Marshall Plan. After World War II, the United States has to go in and help rebuild Europe. And in doing so, he reframes the Marshall Plan as humanitarian, that America has a responsibility to be into the world, but not from a military perspective. They're trying to prioritize military action after 4.5 long years of war. He repositions it as humanitarian to restore dignity and protect democracy and bring stabilization to a free world. Yes, those are big examples, but I think one of the things that we should be cognizant of is what we can learn from them. The institutions, the missions, the nonprofit, the work we do is non-negotiable. We want to do that work. The question is how we do it. And if we don't evolve, then we run into stagnation and eventually decline, possibly going out of business. So how do you do this? What I want to do today over the next probably 10 to 12 minutes is in a very high level is talk about how you maintain institution, but you evolve with change. And each situation is a little different. We're all dealing with different challenges, but most of my clients, I'm trying to get them to evolve into higher levels of philanthropy. Those that do, I can show the results. Growth of millions and millions of philanthropic dollars that are being pushed back in the organization to do good. And then there are the examples of the ones that are fighting this. And they're the ones that I'm hearing, well, I got a budget problem now and I don't have enough money in the org. That's because we're not willing to evolve. So let's start with why this is necessary. Organizations, as we talked about at the top, Darwin being probably one of the great examples from a scientific discovery in the 50s or so. Survival of the fittest. If you don't change, you will die. How do you get to the point where you are willing to adjust? And not because it's the only option, but because you know it's best for you and the organization. But at the same time, why are institutions important? They are important. Institutions, particularly in nonprofit work, preserve trust with our staff, with our relationships with donors, with our board, with our community. They also are a cornerstone because if we are an institutionalist, by definition, we believe in the mission that we currently have that serves the greater community. Our board, our organization has a spot in the greater world that fills that need, and we serve that mission. So it's not to say that change should drive, well, let's just change what we do, but how do we stay within what we do and change to make it better? So what are the principles of balancing this change versus what I would call the thought of institutionalism or preservation. You start with figuring out what are the sacred values. What are the things that are a cornerstone? Now, we mentioned one a minute ago. In your institution, your mission probably is sacred. What it is you do, what are you trying to accomplish? What difference are you trying to make? Inside philanthropy, if we go down kind of a level or two, a sacred value or several that probably all agree upon, at least I hope so, are things like we are donor centered, that we want to maximize the conversations we have with people about how they can be involved and honor their gifts, that we believe in transparency, that what we do should be open and honest, and that we should believe in stewarding in general. I don't think sometimes we do it all that well as an industry. And the last podcast, I talked about that. The comparison in the idea of salesperson versus philanthropy, that my experience with stewardship in the car buying process. We should believe in that. Those are really core things that are sacred to who we are and what we believe in philanthropy. What are those sacred values? And how do you get everyone to agree upon them? The second thing then is to anchor the change that needs to occur within those sacred values, and for the most part, within the mission. I don't think I've ever run into a scenario or situation where you have a issue or a challenge for people saying, no, we don't want to do more or do it better of what our mission describes we should be. So if we all agree that what we need to do more of this, whatever that mission is, then we can also probably should agree that we can make adjustments to do the more. That when we frame these changes, frame the idea of improvement, it has to be mission aligned. And it has to be along the line of the goal of those sacred values. That's why you start with those sacred values, that mission, because what we're doing is to elevate that. And you may run into people who say, I don't care, I don't want to change what I'm doing. Well, then that means they're probably not a good fit for you and for your mission, because the core of who we are is to elevate the work we do, the impact, the outcome, whatever that is. In philanthropy, that's probably surrounding needing more dollars, more money to make the nonprofit better, more effective, stronger, more impactful. The third thing is to prioritize your stakeholders. Who are the people that need to be a part of this conversation? Internal stakeholders, such as leadership, key volunteers, staff. I remember, as an example, many years ago, and I give one of my two mentors, Glenn Fosdick, an immense amount of credit, when the University of Nebraska Medical Center was moving from a pension program to a 401k program, like many organizations have over the last 20 years, the institutional priority was retirement. We need to provide a strong, engaged program to ensure that our employees could retire. The difference is that the change was going from a pension program to having them have their own 401ks and a large match. Well, when he stepped into that as a core, our core is to make sure you can retire. That made it easier for the change to occur. But you have to embrace and engage those internal stakeholders. Who are the people that need to be involved in the conversation and direction for these changes to actually occur and be successful? Then there's the external stakeholders, funders, donors, community partners, community leaders. You need to list them and what is their impact? And then secondarily, how do we bring them together? Maybe separately in smaller groups and eventually into a little bit larger groups and eventually into a large group that is all looking to be and embracing for that change. So prioritize and identify those stakeholders. Number 4 is really focus or embrace the idea of incrementalism. These kinds of things, if you're looking to increase the number of major gifts you have, or principal gifts, plan gifts, you're looking to add a new CRM or change how you do your internal business. Maybe it's new leadership at the top. You're trying to figure out how they fit into this. Maybe it's you're the new leader and you're looking at how do I make this better? Incrementalism is important. If you go in and overhaul, you're going to meet more resistance. The more we are in the kind of thought process of, to steal from Jason Jennings, small bets, and that we're going to take a lot of small scale pilot initiatives of how many resources we have, how much, so we can keep doing our business, and then measure them. And we're going to keep evolving step by step by step. Now, for someone like me, that is incredibly frustrating. I'm probably not very good at it because I see something and I'm like, we got to change it right now. Let's go. But most people don't like that. So you have to embrace the idea of incrementalism because you want it to work over the long term. Think about weight loss. You don't have a doctor say you need to lose 100 pounds next week. First of all, it's probably not possible. But number two, what they know is that it's life change that causes health change, not just drop a bunch of weight and then go back to, that's why weight bounces up down. Go right back to what you were doing before. Slow incremental change. The last is you have to communicate, over communicate, communicate again. Then when you're done communicating, you do more communication. You have to build coalitions in the communication. Who are the people on board? Who have seen success? How do you share that success? An example, I'm building a grateful patient program in a system. There are all these hospitals that have maybe a little bit of independence, and some want to do this, some don't, but the system said this is what we're going to do. We're using communication as to raise more money, institutionalism. We need to raise more money. The change is we need to be probably more aggressive with our grateful patients. What's interesting is that we're using success where we'll say, this place did this. What was the result? And they say, oh my gosh, we got A, B, and C as a result of this. What that's led to is others embracing it. So creating those cohorts, those coalitions, and communicating what we're looking to do. Is everybody on board? Let's answer questions. Let's say it again, what we're trying to do. Let's have a small plan. Let's show that plan. Build credibility to get to those changes while not stripping away the institution of which we believe. So you want to clarify the core values. What are the things that are sacred? Number two, anchor what you change in those things. Number three is really figure out who your key stakeholders are. Number four is really focus on the incrementalism, small changes over time that get you to that final goal. And number five is communicate, communicate, over communicate, and communicate again. The plan, the successes, the challenges, be open. A couple seconds here on understanding what are the challenges. The first is that you may need some outside help in kind of assessing and diagnosing where you're at and where you need to go. I find myself doing more development audits. I'm not selling it. I'm just saying, what's the starting point and what's your goal? And then how do I help build a plan over 2, 3, 4, 5 years to do that? It's almost like a mini strategic planning process, but the auditing kind of gives a baseline. That's going to help identify bottlenecks, inefficiencies. You're going to need data. You're going to need a ton of data to actually show and prove why this is important. Because if you audit correctly and you kind of have understanding of bottlenecks, then you can begin the process of figuring out how to design and plan this entire process. This is where it's really important. This communication, remember that last thing, is communicating the plan. You need buy-in. Because when you talk about creating and designing a plan, everybody's going to have an opinion. How do you remain open but still move forward? How do you take the good suggestions and implement them? How are you open enough, and are you open enough to appreciate others' perspectives that might make it even better? That's all about buy-in. For those that want to be actively involved and for those that are skeptical, the more you do buy-in, the better off you are. The other thing that should come, particularly when it comes to philanthropy, is understanding what you're asking for. Most of the things that I'm dealing with nonprofits and social service, healthcare, education doesn't make any difference. It's about budget, and that there's a lot of concern about increasing fundraising's budget, in particular for major gift and planned giving officers, principal gift officers, building more individual relationships, the transformational relationship process. We need resources. You spend money to make money. That sometimes is a culture issue. So, what is the plan? And maybe one of the sacred things to realize is we want to enhance the donor journey. To do that, we need more people, which gets into improving the operations. What we do, how we do it, what are the responsibilities, how do we measure it? The last thing I'll suggest is comes with this idea again of Jason Jennings. It's okay to fail on small parts. No good development in an organization or an improvement or an evolution ever came without failure. The key is to monitor, evaluate, and adjust. Do you have key performance indicators, a map, key dates you're trying to figure out? How do you figure out how to ensure that you're moving forward and adjust as you go? Because if you don't do this, you're not ready for the change that's to come. No one person or even a small group at the beginning has the answers to all of the processes, all the success, all the mapping. How you go from an event-driven staff to a major gift staff, how you increase your pipeline, how you change your CRM, how you change your priorities or strategic planning process that gets more high-level things to be raising money for. Does not come if you're looking at keeping the institution, but changing a little bit of the process doesn't come with pain, without pain or without mistakes. I'd be remiss if I did not mention here in the last 30 seconds that there's going to be pitfalls. There's going to be challenges. Number one is resistance from internal people who don't want to change, from external people who don't want to see change, boards who say, nope, this is the way we've always done it. How do you get them to see it a little bit differently? Internal people who, I've done this for 30 years. I'm not doing it any differently. This is where you have to realize that leadership and the journey isn't always perfect. There are going to be bumps, pitfalls. So resistance is really an internal pushback, external push, however you want to categorize it. There's going to be some level of resistance. If you're changing what you do, you may be changing technology. There is a moment where your organization has technology overhaul fatigue, where there's too much changing. We can't do all of these things. This is why a staged approach is important. If you're putting in a new CRM on day one, it's A, not going to work as well. And number two, people aren't going to know how to use it. And if you then also add a planned giving technology and we're going to change the website, just an example, series of examples, it's too much. Figure out where those pressure points, get feedback. Are we doing too much? But technology is changing so much that what's happening is we have fatigue. The last thing is, the further you go along, the more likelihood there is to be misalignment or a misalignment process with your mission, with the core mission of who you are. That's why when we started this whole thing, we talked about how important it was that you start with the sacred values, who you are. And those are always the first things you come back to. Because misalignment will have people jumping off the ship if they don't want to see the change. Yes, some of this is more philosophical, probably not quite as much tactical in this particular episode, but those organizations that are willing to adapt, to grow, to evolve, to keep their institution, the values that they have, but change the way they do their business a little bit to do more of it, are the ones that will succeed. And I promise you, because there's more examples than the ones I started with about institutionalists who were leaders that caused change but kept the institution. the Martin Luther Kings, the Abraham Lincolns, the Franklin Delano Roosevelts, the George C. Marshalls. There's a list 5,000 times longer, but not as well known, of the places and people who weren't willing to change because they died off into the ashes of history. Make sure you're willing to do this and think about it a little bit, because it's coming or it's there. One or the other. Who you are today is not who you will be tomorrow, if you want to do all the things that are necessary to make your mission more fulfilled. Don't forget to check out the blogs at Hallett Philanthropy, 2 per week. Things I read, things I see. Hallett Philanthropy, 90 seconds. In fact, I've gotten a little bit more feedback saying, wow, I hadn't heard that. Wow, I hadn't thought about that. Might be worth it. HallettPhilanthropy.com/blogs, or just go to Hallett Philanthropy, click on the blogs, get an RSS feed if you'd like. Also, don't forget to reach out to me at podcast@HallettPhilanthropy.com. What we're doing every day is critical because, going back to my favorite saying, some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, then there are those who wonder what happened. What we do today is critical because we are people. Hopefully, you're one of them, joining, hopefully me, in this pursuit of being someone who makes something happen for the people and the places and the organizations and the things in our community that are wondering what happened. At the end of the day, I can't imagine spending my life in any other method where I'm trying to make the world a better place. You are doing the same, whether you're a board member, CEO, gift officer, CDO, CPO, whatever. It doesn't make a difference. You're someone trying to make things happen. Realize how important that is, the value that it brings, and how, even when there's challenges, when there's process change, but you're still trying to maintain that institutional direction of the organization, sometimes painful, what you do every day is a difference maker. Small, big, doesn't make any difference. It's helping those, the organizations we love, who are wondering what happened, have the support that's necessary. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for your commitment to our profession. And most importantly, to the community in which you serve. I'll look forward to seeing you the next time, right back here on the next edition of Around with Randall. And don't forget, make it a great day.